Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. David here, and it's another painting video this time. I've got crafting videos on the go, but I did need to take a break from it, and I have got that big superhero consignment coming in very shortly, so I did need to get some inroads made into that pile of shame to make way for the new stuff that's arriving. And it occurred to me that I'm over 80 videos into the channel, and there is one big block of gamers that I haven't particularly acknowledged. I'm talking of course about the Games Workshop, and in particular the Warhammer 40k universe. Now I'll be honest, it's not an intentional snub. I was back in my teens a big Games Workshop fan. You know, the concept of getting like a starter set with armies on both sides, your dice, your rules, bit of terrain, everything you needed to basically get up and get a game going was absolutely brilliant. And there is loads of their stuff that I have bought over the years. Most of my collection, if I am being perfectly honest, is Games Workshop stuff. However, I did get back into AD&D, and that's where my sort of time and energy went off in the direction of. And of course, yeah, there's that elephant in the room, which is their business practices and things like that. And I kind of got out of the habit of following what was going on in the Games Workshop universe. All that being said, there is an awful lot of stuff on the pile of shame, which is Games Workshop product, and that is what I'm going to be tackling today. Now, this particular lot, I actually purchased last century. This is the wife's army. It is her Space Orks, and they were chosen for her because, well, they have speed freaks and she's the petrol head in the family. I'm the more calm one. But they have been sitting on the back burner. It's one of those things where, you know, as a good husband, I'll get round to it. Today's the day I'm getting round to it. So let's crack on, see what I've still got sitting there to be assembled and painted, and get on with them. Now, I wouldn't normally show things on the sprue. I would normally start much later in the process than this, but seeing as how it is quite a large amount of troops, I thought I'd best take a stock take. So I have already been into one of the boxes, and I've separated out what is 4 sprues of Orks, and I've got some bases for them there as well. So that comes to 16 boys, and it's been so long since I've looked at Games Workshop stuff, I've no idea what the packaging looks like. That is what it used to be like back at the turn of the century. Right, what else do we have here? Okay, 1, 2, that's the remnants of something that I've already made. So these are just spare arms, weapons and heads from boys that I've already done. Loads of assorted wheels and what looks to be 3 trucks in that box. And what's in this one? Oh, okay, alright. Stuff that I have already started. I'm trying to remember what this one was called. I think it was a gun truck. And I, from the looks of it, converted it so that it's a rocket launcher. Okay, looks like it needs a paint touch up on that, so that's not quite complete. And there's a couple more miniatures in here which I can see aren't quite complete either, so they'll need to be added in. Burner boys, so flamethrowers. Right, what are these? Okay, so these are the boys from Gorka Morka. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what looks to be 3 more sprues of 4 boys each, so that's another 12. And then we're on to more vehicles. Bike, gun truck like we saw, bike, 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 9 bikes, terrain barrier accessory sprue, don't need that. Okay, what are these? One's one of the gun trucks like we had before, and that looks like the sprue for a war buggy. Right, that's going to be a lot of vehicles to do as well. Okay, I'd best get cracking and start assembling these. And after a huge flurry of building activity, we have some miniatures here ready to go off for a black base coat. I always use black on Orks because they're a sort of darker tone of miniature, and you know, black sort of lends to dulling things down. Plus there's an awful lot of metal which will get dry brushed with gunmetal or silver. So what do we have? We've got 28 assorted Gorka Morka and Battle Force boys here, and I also applied base texture to those burner boys because they need to be finished off. Obviously that war track needs to be finished off, and I've got 5 vehicles assembled and ready to go. Now I'm not going to do the bikes in this lot. I'm not happy with the way that the Ork bikes look, so I've got to have a think about how I am going to, you know, customise or redo those. But talking of customisation, I am really happy with all of these trucks and war buggies because I have managed to make them all individual, and essentially that's the orkiness about them. Just a front end swap on, you know, sort of like the front panelling for those plus different crash bars, so that sets those out. This one I've chopped and elongated the chassis plus the cargo bay, passenger compartment if you want to call it. I've built that up at the back. The theme for all of this army is essentially vehicles that myself and the wife have owned, and we did at one stage have a big family passenger van, so that had to be done. And the part that I am most proud of is taking one of the war buggies and the other one of these war tracks, using the front end of one, attaching it to the back end of the other, so I've got a lovely little half track there and a 3-wheeler bike. So let's get these off for an undercoat and then we can get on with some actual painting. I'm going to pause the video there for another talky bit. It occurred to me while I was assembling those vehicles that back when I first got all the sets and saw what there was, one of the things that I wanted to do was make all the vehicles very unique, and one of the big plans that I always had was to do that conversion of taking the front end of one vehicle, attaching it to the back end of another, so that I had 2 very unique separate pieces. But I, thinking back, was never 100% certain how I would go about it, and to be perfectly honest, I wasn't sure whether or not my skill level was up to making a reasonable job of it. And that one factor, that one conversion job, well 2, because it was 2 vehicles, is probably the reason why they have sit and languished on the pile of shame for so long, because I just didn't have confidence in myself to be able to do it. And even as I was constructing them, it's got to be said, it was definitely squeaky bum time making sure that I got it right. And I am happy with the result, but in hindsight, yeah, I've got almost 25 years more of modelling experience. Could I have done it sooner? I'll never know. But it does give me pause to thought for all of the grand plans that I have or have had in all of the stuff that's on the pile of shame. Maybe I do need to go back and revisit some of those projects and get them out of the way, because yeah, they've been sitting there for so long, and I'm a far better, far more accomplished modeller now. Not necessarily up to the skills of some of you viewers, I have no doubt, but yeah, it's probably time to start tackling them in earnest. Anyway, back to the painting. So everything's had its main base coat, but there are a few touch-ups of black that we want to do before we carry on. The first one is just to get the bases, the ground cover, done on these ones, because obviously I didn't respray those. Then on these vehicles, and I'll show you with the white one because that'll show up better on camera, you can see where I've sprayed the outside, but it has just oversprayed onto the inner, and we want that all black. And also what we want to do is just redo these outer struts and panels. So I'll crack on with all of that. Now that I've got the touch-ups done, everything gets a quick dry brush with grey. And I do mean everything. Oh, and of course vehicles get a bit of a dry brush of grey on the wheels just to set those tyres off. Right, please excuse the noise of any fans going because it is the height of winter over here and I've got the fan going and heat transfer kits. So if the sound quality isn't brilliant, please do excuse that. But where are we up to? Now, off camera, what I did have to do, because I was a little bit zealous on the grey dry brushing, I had to use just a little bit of watered down black ink and knock some of those highlights back on some of the models. But we are on to the next stage, and this is old bolt gun metal, and I am going to use that as a dry brush, and we are going to do all of the sort of exposed metal bits on the vehicles, and we are going to do all of the weaponry on the Orks, just like that. And I'm not too worried about going onto the flesh because that is getting coloured separately. This is meant to be a fast paint job. And then with regards to the vehicles, just dry brushing to pick out the sort of struts and the flooring. Now I'm leaving the seats because I'm doing them a different colour, but I'll get all of that side body work because that is a bit on the visible side depending on which angle you look at. And I'll use a smaller brush to pick out the wheel hubs. Yeah, that's looking far more like a lived-in vehicle. Okay, we're on the skin colour now, and obviously being Orks they are green, and I'm going to block this in as quickly as I can, and I am not too worried about anything which is sort of leather or a band or gloves or anything like that because they are a higher level and will get over painted. And I'm also not too worried about leaving any sort of dark black gaps because that all just adds to the shading, and it's going to get another coat of a lighter goblin green over the top. So I will just get all of these done, and it's going to take a while, so I'll check back with you in a moment. I fully appreciate it may not look exactly awe-inspiring at this point, but I just want to point out that with them being based and no bare metal or plastic, colour for the uniform, colour for the guns, colour for skin, that's a battlefield ready army already. Well, force, because there's only 30 of them, and we want far more of those than just 30 for Orks. Now, because it's not a brilliant paint scheme at the moment, we're just going to use some goblin green and it's a dry brush just to bring out the muscle tone a little bit better. Right, it's time to start getting a little bit of spot colour and detail on, and the next thing I'm going to do is start painting in, and this is leather brown. We're just going to do some of those straps, and all of them have a belt that needs to be done, and on the vehicles there is of course the leather on the seats, and we're just going to get that done in like that as well. I had forgotten how time consuming it can be doing detail work on a huge amount of miniatures, but we are getting more towards the final stages of this paint job. There's only about 5 more coats to do, and I've swapped to a light tan, and I am going to just do a bit of an overbrush on any of the fur bits just to make them stand out a little bit better. And then I'm swapping to a detail brush, and this is for all of the fingernails. And with 30 troops, I have got 300 fingernails to do. Yay me. And I'm also going to use the same colour just on the bases of the teeth. This is going to take some time, so I'll crack on. Right, that's that mammoth task done. And swapping to bleached bone. And we're just going to get those teeth done in like that. And while I'm at it, I'm going to use this just to put a little dot where the eyes are. Difficult to see with this guy's hat on. In fact, I'll swap to another miniature because I just want the eyes standing out a wee bit better with a brighter background, because they're going to be getting painted in red. So there's not that much left to do. Eyeballs next, and like I said, I'm just using blood red on here
dot and dot. And I'm also going to use red for a lot of the iconography, so there is some on that gun there. I mean, it's going to be quite obscured on the tabletop, but if you are kind of looking at it from different angles, at least you do get a bit of spot colour. Very close to the end for the troops, and I'm going back to the metallics, bolt gun metal rather than shining silver, and I'm just going to use that to pick out some of sort of like the things like the belt buckles. So on this one there's a big ring at the back, pick out some of those studs, and there's the odd little buckle knocking around the place that could probably just do with, you know, touch up just to bring back the colour. Very last colour on the troops, and I've got copper here, and I'm just going for things like the jewellery. I'll double check in case there's any, you know, buckles or shackles that I've missed, belt buckles, things like that, and then that will be all of these done. Oh, a bit of iconography there, just a final little bit of spot colour just to break things up, bit of a brighter one because everything else has been a little bit dull, and that essentially is him finished. And that is all of the boys done. I've even picked up the burner boys and finished off the last few little bits of spot colour that had to be done on those, things like hoses and straps and things like that. So troops are complete. Now it is the vehicles, and to be perfectly honest, the video would be far too long if I did each individual one in turn, because they are all going to be getting a custom paint job. So what I will do is complete these and check back in when it is time to weather them. Right, the boys are all complete. Now time to do the finishing touches on the vehicles, because they're the ones that really are going to stand out on the table. Now there is a technique that I have used on these, and it's an old technique. It's called black lining. It's where you use either a black ink or thin down black paint, and where you have two things, like say for example clothes and a leather strap, in that join between them you just put a very fine line just to make the two sort of stand out from each other and really sort of highlight the belt. Okay, it's a kind of shading, but it's a very stark one. I don't use it generally speaking because inks tend to do exactly the same thing on miniatures, but they are very, very useful where you have things like this, where you've got a number of different plates that are the same colour, an actual colour, and you just want a little bit more of a definition between the joins just to make them separate. Now, rather than a black ink, what I have got, courtesy of youngest daughter, is some fine liners, all different colours. Yes, there is a black there, but what it means is you can actually select a more appropriate, slightly more subtle colour to be able to make those joins between the plates, and it doesn't really stand out as much as a black does. So for example, on this one I used a brown pen between the joins. Because the green on this is really dark, I did have to use black, and I used a grey pen to do the gaps on this white one. So that's a bit of a tip for you. Get yourself a set of these if you're doing large amounts of vehicles, or even if it's, you know, modern or sci-fi terrain and you've got, you know, panels joining together. Set of these, draw down, and it'll all just make it pop ever so slightly more. Now,
I have been toying up with whether or not I was going to put sort of real battle damage on these. Chips of paint, put rust on, things like that. And I've decided not to because I do like the idea that they've got a nice fresh paint colour on them, kind of fresh out of the workshop as it were. But I am going to do a bit of weathering on the flatbeds at the back. And to start off with on that, I've got a bit of a scouring pad here and some orange paint. And you've seen me do this before, and I'm just going to put some dabs of that in around the flatbed just to break up that really silver colour. And then just to get that rust looking a little bit older, we're going to go over it with some brownie in exactly the same way. Let's make sure that's stippled on properly. And of course, if you're a little bit heavy-handed on it, you can always wipe it off with a paper towel. Right, last couple of colours for the weathering, and this is grey. And we're just going to use this to put a little bit of sort of dust up and around where it's been driving. So, some up around the front there, and up over the wheel arches, and the side of those tracks, and on the track wheels themselves. Then the very last weathering colour is just a light tan, and I'm just going to use that on sort of the very edges for sort of more fresh dirt, bit around the wheel rims. And then once I'm done with this, it'll be some photos. Well, that's about all we have in what is probably going to be part one, because let's face it, orc armies are massive and I've got to drag out all the rest of the stuff, put it all together, see what still has to be done. The painting itself did take longer than expected in real time. I think that's probably due to a lack of confidence on myself. I've been thinking about this one for so long that I really had it stuck in my mind's eye how I wanted it to all to look, and it was just, you know, pushing myself to take that next step, to put that next coat of paint on, especially on those vehicles. But it's got to be said, I am more than happy with the way they have turned out. These ones are my favourites. This was the conversion job that I'd wanted to do for years and years. Front end of one, back end of the other, swap them round, and they have turned out absolutely brilliantly. And of course, the long wheelbase on the Playa Snot, that was one that had to be done because, yeah, that was our big van. But during the course of finding all of the parts for, you know, little conversions and things like that, the amount of orc related stuff that started coming up, these have to be included. That's an old first generation orc, back to go with the Womble Marines. So there's some of those knocking around and they've got to be repainted and added in. So yes, there will be more videos where I'm revisiting the Ork Army in, well, the not too distant future. But there are other things coming up and I really need to turn my attention to those. Well, that about wraps it up for another video from me. If there's something you want to see me cover in the future, whether it's a particular project or a genre, pop a note in the comment section down below, let me know what you're after. If you're new around here, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Like the video if you did, and if you really liked it, then there's another suggested one just there for you to have a look at. Either way, I'll see you guys in a little bit, or in a few seconds if you do watch that one. Doodle pip!